How is free will impacted when we have prophecies and things that are fated to become true? Do you still have free will? Are you bound to do what was prophesied? And what if we have other factors, including outside factors, that are impacting your free will and your decisions? These are some things I want to talk about in this video. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we're going to be talking about the nature of free will, how that kind of comes in with prophecy, some other things like that, and specifically doing this around the world of the Wars of Light and Shadow by Janny Wurts. This is the first book, Curse of the Mystery, and the ideas and the themes that we're going to be talking about are all going to be found within this first book, so this won't spoil you for this series, although I will give this kind of a, I guess, light spoiler warning because of the fact that I am going to be talking about some things that are discussed and shown throughout the first book. So if you're the kind of person who likes to go in completely blind, this may not be a video for you. At the same time, though, I think the things I'm going to discuss may help you actually become more interested in the series versus actually spoiling anything. So we're going to keep this pretty spoiler-free and just really be talking about this in more of an abstract way, although I will be talking about the characters, some of the things that are set up, and some of the basis for this book, so I do want you to be aware of that. I will later on in the video be talking about one specific thing, which is a spoiler at the end of this book, but that's really relevant to the conversation, and so I will have that clearly marked with timestamps so that you can't skip past that if you do not want to know that spoiler. So first off, let's talk about what we have presented in Curse of the Mystery and why prophecy, free will, and these things are so important and why they're explored so much. So the book opens up with two princes. Now I'm going to have that song stuck in my head. With two princes, Erathon Cephalon and Lysair Selescid, who are on the world of Dax and Eler. And they are both part of a prophecy on another world of Aethera, where in here they're prophesied to basically defeat the Mistwraith, which has plagued this world for over 500 years, and that is kind of the basis here. Now there's more that goes into it because both of these princes, while having this prophecy, they also have inborn traits that were passed down to them from their ancient lineage and the High Kings that they descend from. With Erathon, it is an inborn, basically, amount of compassion. So that is a specific part of his personality that is just ingrained in there. It's been passed down, and it is a very specific thing for where he'll feel compassion. That is just a part of him. And for Lysair, it is an inborn feeling of justice. So that's, once again, something that's passed to him, and so that's an integral part of his person because of that. And I find the idea of that really interesting, especially because free will, balance, and permission are all really important parts about this series and this world and the magic system when you explore it more. You talk about that a lot. So how is that impacted when you have a trait that is passed down through the lineage like this? And we learn that basically, this wasn't something that's just like it was forced upon them. The original bearers of this, they specifically agreed to have this happen and to go down their lineage, but it does bring up the questions of, well, the people who are inheriting this, they didn't necessarily agree to it, so it's a really interesting question, and that's something that I kind of like exploring and thinking about. But so not only do we have this, we also have the prophecy, and they have some more inborn gifts, because the prophecy sets out, essentially, that also delivered through lineage, there's somebody who is going to be born with the inborn mastery of light as an element and inborn mastery of shadow as an element. But the person who's passing this along decides to actually divide it up, basically, and so has a son that becomes Lysair with one king, and has a son with another king, which is then Erathon. So two different families, the Selescid and the Cephalon, and that's the impetus here. They also happen to be, enemies on the world of Dax and Eler, and so that is what our impetus is it started with. So there's a lot of inborn things going on. Now this is all, like I said, things that part is very much the beginning of the book. You get most of this in even the prologue, so it might sound like this is a lot of information, but this is just kind of what the book is about. And they're fated to come to Aethera and then once again defeat the Mist Wraith. That's what they're supposed to do. So already we have these characters where it seems like they don't really have a lot of free will and they don't have a lot of decisions. And I know that's something that some people have criticized about the book Curse of the Mist Wraith, because if you look at Curse of the Mist Wraith in a microcosm, just in a vacuum on its own, then yeah, they're kind of being forced along, and we're doing typical thing where it's like, oh, the prophecy says they have to, so that they have to. But the thing to keep in mind is Curse of the Mist Wraith, you are really, you're not even scratching the surface. I was going to say barely scratching the surface, but you really aren't. This is the surface. We're living on the surface in Curse of the Mist Wraith, and we're only just really starting to get there and to set up some things that are going to happen. And if you base the entire series off this first book, as I'd say with pretty much any book, you're not going to even begin to grasp the scope, let alone with this series that has a broader scope than I think anything else I've probably read, with the degree it goes into a lot of things. The only thing even slightly comparable, although being an incredibly different series, is Malazan, which I know I've heard a lot of other people bring up, just because that's another series that has a pretty crazy big scope, but there is so much more going on here, and once you start to really peek beneath the surface and then dig in, and it takes quite a few books before you really start to get to some of these deeper, bigger things, because it's always building toward it. So that's something I wanted to bring up too, because I've seen, I know like there's the popular review from Mark Lawrence where he talks about this as well, and not at all saying that he's wrong, or that, his opinions aren't correct. He's talking about this very first book and has some valid complaints, and I felt kind of the same way when I was reading this book, and that's one of the reasons I want to talk about this is it does seem like it's just, it's, the typical thing, the prophecy coming, but there is so much more actually going on, and these characters' decisions, even if they have, outside forces or these other factors in there, they're still very much important, and we learn throughout this series that balance is very important. We talk about the law of major balance, which is specifically for the magic. It needs to be followed, where everything has to be balanced, and you're supposed to ask due permission. Whether that's from a person or from a rock, you're supposed to ask permission in order to use that or to do whatever the magic that you're wanting to do. And that is a huge, huge part of the series, and a huge theme that's looked at is permission and balance and these things. So how does that fit in with these characters? And well, talking about this is something, like I said, with it being, this being a spoiler-free where I'm not going to go in, I obviously get to talk about how this affects big events and different things, but it's really interesting to look at because I've never read anything else that has this kind of built in, where we're really focused on free will, but also have a lot of factors that will impact the free will and how that's actually going to be happening. And I'm going to really quick talk about the one other big one, which is a spoiler for the end of Curse of the Mist Wraith, so you can skip past this, and then I'll make sure that I continue being spoiler-free after this point as well, but you can check the timestamp here. But we see at the end of this book that while the brothers do defeat the Mist Wraith mostly, there is a backlash, and the Mist Wraith puts a geese on them where both of them will be compelled to kill one another, and basically won't be able to get rid of that until one of them kills the other, or the other is dead in some way. So that's yet another external factor that's put on them, and so they have a lot of different things going around, and it's really interesting to then further explore with all of these factors the idea of their free will. So moving back to the non-spoiler parts there, I mentioned, like I said, that thing which is a spoiler, which just continues to be a factor that I think impacts the idea of free will and the idea of prophecy. And this is a series where there are a lot of prophecies, there are a lot of things, and there are ways that, you can see what's going to happen or what may happen. Things are not always clear, and sometimes they are a little bit more clear. And we also don't always know the full story, especially early on. And you start to get glimpses and see little pieces of the bigger picture as you go along, which I really enjoy, and I think is also something that gives this incredible reread value as well. But I'm digressing a little bit, because of course I am. It's me, you should expect that. This isn't one of them fancy video essays. This is me just talking. But anyway, so I think it's really interesting to explore, though, because we have, like I said, they both have inbound traits. Lysair has this inbound trait into his personality where he's looking for justice. And so his idea of what justice is going to be really important. Whatever he sees as justice, whatever he perceives as justice, that's going to really impact how that trait actually affects him. So it's not just that he has to, it's not like blind justice, like the thing, like he just has to go and there's some objective justice that he has to go. It's extremely subjective, and that's where free will and decision still play a huge part in that. And that's something that, like I said, I thought about that a lot, and as I've gotten further and I've thought about it more, that's kind of the thing that I've really realized. It still is very much up to the individuals and their free will and how they perceive things. And the same is very much true of Erathon, with compassion being the trait that's integral to his personality as well. And that is, it sounds, without reading the book, like compassion, like really? What is that really going to do? But it is really important, because when you feel the compassion that strongly for others, and that's such a big part of you, that can very much impact how you perceive things. And you still get to make the decisions, very much, like that's not going to force you into any decisions or anything like that. But if you are basically, have this compassion for any people, animals, anything you want to go, you have this compassion, that really is going to change your outlook and the way that you look at the world. And that can definitely go both ways too as well. There's not any one way that's locking you in, so even though you have this trait. So I think that's something that's really interesting, just with the idea of these kind of personality traits that are passed down through lineage. And that's where, like I said, it sounds very much like, oh, well, you don't have a choice, you're just kind of being forced into doing something. That's not really the case. It's just a trait that's given. And it's definitely explored a little bit more as you go on with why this was even done. Although it's not something still that's super, super explored. And I was lucky enough to chat with the author on this in one of our live shows going through the books. So if you end up going through and reading the other books or definitely check out the live shows I did on Angie's channel. I'll make sure to link out to her channel, because we talked about a lot of things, including some things that had not been revealed previously, so that was really cool and a lot of fun. But anyway, getting back to it, so it's interesting to think about that, where you have these traits, but free will is very much still there, and although it might change your view also changes how these things are going to affect you and affect the decisions that you make. And going into the idea of prophecy as well, I think the way that prophecy is handled here is also really interesting, because although there are some true prophecies, and there's a character, and we see this in the very first book, there's a character that will from time to time have a absolutely true prophecy. He has extremely strong vision. He doesn't remember afterwards what he said, but it will have true prophecies and know things that are going to happen. And so knowing what's going to happen can absolutely change how you're going to react and what you're going to do. But at the same time, it is going to happen. And so that's always a really interesting thing to look at. And you see a lot of things where it'll be like kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy. That's something you see a lot in media, in general, movies, TV, as well as books, where it's like, oh, I know this is going to happen, so I'm going to do something different, and so because of that, I made it come true. And that's kind of an easy way to do it. It can still be very satisfying, but what we have here is, even knowing what's going to happen and the way it's explored doesn't always mean that you can control the outcome or stop the outcome or actually know a lot of the details. Think about it. If you right now had a true vision, and we're assuming that you can remember it, you had a true vision of something that's going to happen in the future, and you see a scene play out in your head. Well, you don't know when it's going to happen specifically. You don't know why. You don't know any of the lead up to it. You don't necessarily even know where it's going to happen. So, like, all of these questions, and maybe if you're lucky and there's something about the scene that lets you really know exactly, like, oh, I know where this is, you still don't really know the details. And so that's kind of the thing. And I think Janie Wirtz does a really fantastic job with the use of prophecy, because prophecy can be helpful, but it can also not be super helpful. If I find out something that's going to happen, but I don't know any of the details around it, I just know this thing is going to happen, that's not necessarily super helpful. And I might make some changes into how I react and to how I'm going to be doing things. But it's also one of those things where even if it's not a self-fulfilling prophecy, I know it's going to happen, but I don't really know how my actions are also going to affect what draws me there. And so that's another thing where it sounds like it would be a thing where, oh, the characters are being forced into this direction, but it's written really brilliantly in that that's also still not really the case. You still get characters who can make their decisions and do what they're going to do. Sometimes characters will make decisions based on something they know is going to happen. It's not going to stop it from happening, but it once again may impact how they choose with their free will to react. And so despite all of these forces that are pushing against our characters and trying to push them one way or another, they very much still have the free will to act, and that is something that, if you read in the series, you will very much see. There are still many times where many characters, our main characters or even side characters, may be being pushed in a certain direction, or there may be parties who would love them to do a specific thing. Does not mean that they are going to do it at all, and sometimes they're going to do something that really I'm sure other parties would like them to not do, and that being as vague as possible, not give anything away. But that's what I think is so fascinating. It's like I said, I've never seen a story that has such a focus on free will, but then also has so many factors that could potentially dampen that free will. Usually, if you have that kind of thing in a story, it's like, oh, it's the prophecy, like I said, they'll do the self-fulfilling thing, or if they have this compulsion, they just will do exactly that, and that's going to be how it goes, and they just won't have a choice. And that is not the case here, because despite all of these factors, like I said, free will, permission, these things are still really, really important to the magic system of this world, and so our characters still get to choose how they act, although sometimes they don't have a lot of good options, and sometimes they are kind of forced into doing something. That's because they're still choosing to do it. They don't actually have to, they just feel like they don't really have much of a choice. And it's really interesting, I think, to just kind of explore this, and it's one of the things that, especially early on, is, and I meant to make a video about this quite a while ago, but the further I've gotten into the series, I feel like the more understanding you get, and so that's kind of one of the things, I have some other things like this I want to talk about, but that's really the thing I wanted to kind of talk through and explore. And like I said, this isn't really a video essay, this isn't me spouting cold hard facts, this is me just kind of talking over and discussing my thoughts out loud on camera, so that hopefully you can also join the conversation as well, because I'd love to chat with you also. So whether or not you've read this, if you've made it to the end, let me know your thoughts on any of the things I've talked about. Or even if it's just the idea of free will, prophecies, that kind of thing in general. Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments. Of course, you can also come out to the Wizardly Do It Discord. As always, there is a link to it in the description, where we can talk there as well, too, because these are some things that I find fascinating, ideas that I really enjoy talking through, and so there's lots of other series and examples, too, that we can talk about with these ideas, but in case you haven't noticed, I really love this series, and it has so many great things to talk about. I'll definitely be doing some more videos like this, talking about some other aspects that I just find absolutely fascinating as well. So hopefully you enjoy this, and if there's other specific things you'd like to see with discussion videos like this, definitely let me know. Really, that's it though for this one. Like I said, make sure to give the video a like, check the link in the description for the Discord, and of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.